Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Youth Employment Service webinar for February. My name is Marc Ashton, and it is fabulous, as always, to be hosting you today. I'm joined by Chief Partnerships Officer, Furai, and we're going to be taking you through something a little bit different today. We're going to be looking at one of the case studies. I think for a lot of us, we get bogged down in the detail of Excel spreadsheets, yes targets, and other elements like that, but it's always nice to see some of these real-life projects in action. So we're going to be working through that. As always, thank you very much for making your time available. I think it's one of the most valuable commodities we have out there at the moment. And the fact that we see some of the same faces coming and rejoining these sessions each month is always great. Seeing new participants is also fabulous. It just shows that the yes message is really getting out there. So thank you, everybody, for investing your time. And we look forward to chatting to you. Just a reminder, there will be a playback facility made available on the... Oh, excuse me, sorry, I lost my place there for a moment. There will be a playback facility made available, and we will be talking through a couple of the different options and fielding any of the questions available. I'm going to try and activate your video now. Just give me one moment.
Super, thanks, Marc.
As I thought we'd managed to make these things near flawless, but here we go. I'm just going to make, there we go. Furai, you should be able to activate your thing. I thought after all these months of doing webinars, we would have them waxed. But as always, we will be engaging with you. Please feel free to drop questions into the chat facility. It's always nice to be able to actually talk to people rather than talking at you. And we're going to work through a couple of this case study. But Furai and I were actually chatting just before we thought about diving into another PowerPoint presentation and maybe just talking about a couple of reasons to feel optimistic about South Africa. We were looking at discussing some of the things in terms of policy, economic confidence, and a number of these elements. And so what I'm going to do is maybe just throw over to Furai. She's been working on a couple of things with the presidency and a couple of other projects. Furai, reasons to feel optimistic this Thursday morning?
Thanks, Marc. And I think I'm so encouraged that we're starting with these reflections. And I think that there's been so much of these sentiments of doom and gloom, and yet there's so much happening to actually massify employment opportunities for young people. Some of the really exciting initiatives we've been working on with presidency is actually at looking at how do we have an effective youth employment strategy. And we've focused on 5 key areas. The first would be identifying high growth sectors. And these are the sectors that the president mentioned in SONA last week. It's sectors where as much as the country has had some economic decline, these are what we call our sunrise sectors, the sunrise economies, where there are opportunities of scale for young people to be employed. And we focused on 3 main sectors within the presidency at the moment. One would be the ICT and digital sector, whereby the target is to create over 500,000 jobs by 2030, particularly if we're looking at global business services. We know how South Africa has been a hotspot to provide these GBS services to other countries, and we want to continue to upskill young people within this industry. The second sector that's a high growth sector would be the agricultural sector, which has got the opportunity to unlock over 300,000 potential jobs if we expand the production of export-oriented value crops in key provinces like the Eastern Cape, Limpopo, the Northwest, and KZN. And the third sector, one of my favorite sectors, would be the opportunities that are available within the social and care economy. If you are just looking at ECD alone, we can create over 100,000 assistant and auxiliary roles within ECD centers. If we're looking at nursing, South Africa has a nursing shortage of 29,000 nurses. And that's then an opportunity to upskill young people so that they can follow this path. If we're looking at the public health sector as a whole, there is an opportunity to create 23,000 entry-level jobs for young people to be your entry health care workers, like lay counselors and your community tracers. So just from a sectoral perspective, there's so much that's being done in terms of mapping out the opportunities to create jobs for young people. One of the other focus areas we've looked at in presidency is how do we scale up? Yes, and there's really, really exciting conversations which are happening there to increase the participation of companies and also your QSEs and your EMEs. Another focus area for presidency has been ETI. How do we expand the ETI offering so that more businesses can hire young people? And it was really exciting last week to hear the president say ETI has been an effective tool for creating employment for young people at scale. And I really look forward to the Minister of Finance budget speech in the next few weeks, where he'll really be sharing what the details are of these amendments to ETI. And it's great to see all the work that's being done there. And the last two focus areas we've looked at with the presidency, and yes, works with presidency, with Harambee, with the NYDA, with a lot of stakeholders on this task team, is that we've also looked at how do we scale up SA Youth. SA Youth is that centralized platform for learning and earning opportunities. How do we make the cost of job seeking cheaper for young people? And the last aspect we focused on is demand-led skilling. So removing information asymmetries between what young people study and what the market wants. And the TVETs working with DHET are doing lots of work in this space. So Mark, I'm incredibly optimistic about the future of our country. The work is being done, and I've never seen as much collaboration as I've seen in the past few years between the private sector, between government, between civil society. And I believe that if we continue with this momentum, we'll be able to create opportunities for young people at scale and see our unemployment crisis cease to exist. So that's definitely the goal.
Yeah, I mean, I think that word collaboration is such an important one. I mean, my background obviously being financial journalism, so I've gotten to see a lot of, or maybe far too many of the State of the Nation addresses, the budget speeches, etc. And I think there's always been a bit of the cynicism about the fact that there is this lack of collaboration, a lot of empty promises, a lot of things that just can't be resolved. And this is probably one of the first years where after the president spoke, there was this discussion, people actually saying there's some things that are actually legitimately coming through, initiatives are actually happening, there's actually some momentum and collaboration and coordination between the different parties. And I just look at it maybe a little bit more from a numbers perspective. But if you look at the data that's coming out of SARS at the moment, the tax collection from corporates is up 74% year on year. That means the tax systems are working again. I know it isn't very popular at the moment, but you can see that there's a huge emphasis from the municipalities to start gathering their revenue again and dealing with the non-payment of resources from everywhere, from Sandton through to Tshwane, etc. You can see there's clearly an initiative to get our municipalities working. There was a good piece on MoneyWeb from Old Mutual's investment strategist, Isaac Odendaal, and he was just talking about the fact that even though there's a lot of negativity and perceived concerns around the South African economy, there are also things that are starting to look good. The renewable energy sector is really starting to kick in. We're not becoming wholly dependent on Eskom. I just look at the discussions that we're having with the corporates at the moment. Suddenly we're seeing players out of the tourism sector that were absolutely battered under COVID are suddenly coming back, and they're saying there's plenty of reasons to actually be optimistic. We can see foreign tourism coming through. Financial results out of the banks are coming through again. Profits are there. So all of these things are a sign that there is momentum building. And so I think there's a reason to be optimistic. And I think that if we can keep the energy going and use YES as kind of that catalyst for it, I think there's lots on the table. With that in mind, I think we're going to share a success story, but maybe just very quickly, I'm going to run you through the background to YES, so for those who haven't heard the story, and then I'm going to hand over to Furai to take you through a real world case study. So very simply, where does YES find its roots? YES finds its roots back in 2016 from Davos, and there was already a lot of discussions taking place around the world about this issue of youth unemployment. We'd had the Arab Spring. For those who don't know, the youth unemployment rate in South Africa is probably double what it was in Tunisia when the Arab Spring kicked off. So there was clearly an issue that is bubbling under. We saw the situation in the July riots from 2021. There is a huge distrust and a broken social compact that's taking place in South Africa at the moment, and we need to find a way to address this. You can't have one of the youngest populations across the world with one of the highest potential economies and not be able to actually create work opportunities for young South Africans. The moment people feel like they're locked out of the economy, it creates a situation that is untenable. So the discussion started taking place as far back as 2016, and the CEO initiative was launched. And after consultation with private sector, public sector, organized labor, the YES incentive was gazetted in 2018. It's a piece of legislation. Remembering, YES is not a government body. YES does not receive any government funding. It is purely private sector led. And that initiative was a piece of legislation, supported by a piece of legislation called the YES legislation, which rewards organizations with a level up on their BBBE scorecard through the creation of youth jobs. The legislation has been in effect since 2018 and aims to tackle this issue. It's called the experience trap. I can't get a job without experience. I can't get experience without a job. And I think this is a problem that many young South Africans find themselves faced with. One of these, and this case study that Furai will talk to shortly, I was actually involved with some of the interviewing and kind of seeing some of the interviews taking place. And every single one of the 25 candidates that were applying for a community healthcare job had at least a bachelor's degree with honors, and they were looking for an entry-level 3,760 Rand a month job, and they were unable to break into the workforce despite having a tertiary qualification. And that's a scary situation for the world to be in at the moment. So really the purpose of YES is to try and tackle this this work inexperience trap that these youth are facing, and ultimately push them into the workforce, creating real world experience for these youth and helping them build their social capital. YES is not a learnership, it's not an internship, it's not an apprenticeship, it is a 12-month work experience in conjunction supported with this legislation. Just some quick milestones. YES has actually just gone through the 71,000 job milestone. It's very encouraging to see. You can see that uptick that's taking place there. YES is great from a forward-looking perspective and talking a little bit about the confidence that's coming through in the economy. A lot of people talking about YES. A lot of people saying, well, how do we go and expand our YES initiatives? What else can we do to tackle this youth unemployment crisis? And I think people don't make commitments to 12-month work experiences if they don't see some green shoots coming through in the economy. I've touched on what is YES, but maybe just a quick look at the impact to date. YES has created over 71,000 jobs. There's over 1,800 programs running, and over 4 billion rands worth of youth salaries are coming into the economy. As I always touch on this, but I still think it's one of the very unique elements about YES. It has the ability to move income from the kind of Sandtons and Cape Towns of the world into places like Limpopo, Rustenburg, etc., where these youth jobs are sorely needed. We've just launched a new project in the Northern Cape for a sanitary pad micro-franchising initiative that's using funding that has come out of Bryanston and has created jobs in the Northern Cape, where unemployment sits at over 60% in a lot of communities. So really excited by those initiatives. And on top of that, it doesn't just create the jobs associated with the micro-franchise, but it creates a business owner in the process. Just in terms of some of the interesting stats around YES, and a lot of people always looking at these things, those who are familiar with the YES legislation will know that there is a requirement to absorb between 2.5% and 5%, depending on whether you're targeting single or two level ups on your scorecard. This is obviously a rolling target from a YES perspective, but YES is able to create or demonstrate between 32 and 42% youth absorption rate. Over 650 BBBE level ups have been awarded, and you can see the YES smartphones are being adopted by the youth, and they are sharing this and conducting learning minutes as they're going along. Just a quick look at some of the partners who are involved. You can see everything from mining houses through to multinational food groups. The automotive sector has been a huge supporter of YES. And what's quite nice now is we're seeing a lot of the mining houses coming in and saying, well, how can we start integrating YES into things like our social labor plans and our other CSI initiatives? So this is just a couple of our major partners. And what's quite fun, if you look at that list, is a number of these organizations are actually back for their 4th and 5th years of participation. It shows that people are looking at YES as a sustainable long-term solution, and not just for BBBE, but for other social impact initiatives as well. Very quickly, the way, what can you touch on when you're working with YES? placement of Yes Youth for your Triple B level up. We've got some enterprise development and offtake agreements, skills development opportunities, socioeconomic development opportunities, and probably the one that's most exciting at the moment, just because it is the tax year end coming up, you can get a Section 18A when you make a donation to Yes. You can cut your tax bill either as in your personal or professional, either as personal or business taxpayer, and you can go and make sure that your hard-earned money is actually being deployed on social impact projects. If any of you want to make a donation to Yes and you'd like to get some information about it, you can email myself. It's Marc, M-A-R-C, at yesforyouth.co.za. In terms of the formula, so if anyone's not familiar with the Yes formula after 3 years, just very quickly, there's a calculator on the Yes website, but to calculate your Yes target for a generic entity, take 3-year average net profit after tax times by 1.5%, divide by 55,000, or alternatively 1.5% of headcount. You've got the option of 1 level up on your scorecard, 1 level plus 3 bonus points, or 2 full levels on your scorecard. And really, why do you participate in Yes? Bring fresh new ideas into your business, get to try out different youth. I mean, one of the very good examples is that organizations struggle particularly to bring youth into their, particularly differently abled youth, into their workforce. So they often will make use of Yes programs, or they will make use of Yes implementation partners to be able to see if they can use, identify youth that would meet their criteria that could then be absorbed for permanent opportunities. Build and support SMEs and entrepreneurs. There's a big push to integrate Yes into enterprise development initiatives. Collaboration with 1,700 plus partners. You know, if you look at those Yes hubs, or you look at some of the projects that are in the market at the moment, there's a big sense of collaboration. Organizations saying we can't do this on our own. Can we integrate with other projects that are on the go? Yes is always happy to facilitate those discussions. I'm going to jump forward here very, very quickly. We're going to jump around because Furai had some thoughts about this presentation. I'm actually going to hand over to her to take you through a real world case study that we've actually got. We think the ability to talk around what Yes does beyond just a triple BEE incentive, but to talk to actual faces and actual success stories is critical to being able to share the Yes story. So I'm going to hand over to Furai and just talk through a very exciting project that we've got that's just come through, and I'm hoping that she will be able to inspire you with some of the work that's been done here. Furai, over to you.
Thanks, Marc. And I think this is definitely my favorite part of this webinar, where we look at, so beyond the BEE, what is the impact of the Yes program? And we've really seen this impact through the leadership initiative that Yes has done with Pizza Hut, where the focus has been on how do we upskill young women who are between the ages of 18 to 24, and how we're able to give them critical skills so that they can be employable. And I think this is important because as the world focuses more on your SDGs and your ESGs, we can then look at aligning each of the projects and initiatives we run at Yes with our corporates to focus on these goals and targets. With the leadership initiative, it focuses on SDG 4, which is about gender equality, and SDG 8, which is about decent work and economic growth. And the reason this initiative focuses on young women is because we know from the QLFS that the official unemployment rate for African Black women was 41.3%, the highest of any group. And as such, there was an intent with Yes working with Yum, Pizza Hut, to say, how do we empower young women from 18 to 24 with critical skills that they need so that they can break into the job market, and then they can build a solid foundation as they navigate their careers. So in terms of how we have done this, we have got 109 young women who are based within Gauteng and the Western Cape. They come from a number of communities within these two provinces, ranging from your urban, semi-urban, and your rural communities. We have then linked these young women with implementation partners. And I'll take you through each of the partners and the work they're doing to show you the diverse skill set that these youth will gain as they complete their journey as Yes Youth. The first image you see here is the YCC, the Youth Content Collective, and they do fantastic work by helping turn Black creatives into micropreneurs. And the creative industry is such a big industry that as South Africa, we're still missing the mark on. So it's incredible to have a partner who look at how do we empower and assist photographers, videographers, illustrators, monetize their talents, work for themselves, and also build various communities and businesses within the community with their authentic creative assets. So they had their launch last week, Friday, at the Yes Hub, and it was great to see the excitement from these young creatives in terms of how the program would be. The second partner we have that is working on the leadership initiative is Youth Health Africa, an organization I proudly used to work for. They are an affiliate of the Aurum Institute, and Youth Health Africa focuses on placing young people into your clinics as entry-level healthcare workers. And this, in fact, does health systems strengthening. It supports the Department of Health in reaching its HIV and TB targets. These youth work in various roles ranging from lay counselors to HIV self-screeners, community mobilizers, and data capturers. And it's fantastic that 31 young women will work in the clinics. And what we're hoping for is that should healthcare be their passion, they could be absorbed into South Africa's healthcare system and be able to really strengthen the system. One of the next partners we have is Click Learning. Click are a fantastic partner who deploy online English literacy and numeracy programs in underprivileged schools across South Africa. Here again, 31 of these young women will work within these schools as Click facilitators to facilitate these literacy programs in school computer labs. And we do have to ensure that young people do have these critical skills to be prepared for another buzzword, that being the 4IR. And one of the last partners we have as part of the leadership initiative is Youth at Work, another fantastic Yes partner who facilitate the creation of jobs within schools and communities. Youth here will work as your teacher assistants, and also there's a number of youth here who will work in the creative arts, looking at their drama skills and how drama heals one's trauma. And I think what's super is that in these roles, these young people can really strengthen the schools that they come from, and they can really have an impact in terms of not only what young people in the school are able to learn, not only in freeing up the workload of those teachers, but also in healing and dealing with trauma. So it's really exciting to see this leadership initiative in practice. And it's one of the examples we really love at Yes, which shows how beyond signing up for Yes for BEE purposes, there is so much more that we can do if we intentionally focus on what are deliverables we want to meet within the communities. How do we align with ESG and SDG initiatives? And then how do we measure impact? And the impact for these young women will be measured over 4 years so that we can understand what exactly the trajectory is for each of them, and whether we have succeeded in removing barriers that young women face in accessing employment opportunities. So over to Marc to talk you through more of the implementation partner model and how this aligns with your ESG and SDG initiatives. Thanks, Marc.
Thanks, Furai. I'm going to just stop for a moment and give the audience a chance. If any of you'd like to submit any questions in the chat facility or in the Q&A facility, please feel free to interact with us if you've got any questions about how this project was put together. But maybe what I'd like to do is just give a little bit of context around the work that goes into these things. Furai's team has been very actively, and I think since Furai has arrived at Yes, one of her big pushes has been to kind of build our implementation partner model quite extensively. We look at things like vetting these partners on a monthly basis, ensuring financial stability, ensuring that there's an understanding not just of the BBBE legislation, but also the quality work experience, understanding that these youth are being entrusted to you by corporates that are investing significant amounts of money with these projects. Is there the ability to ensure that they can actually get a quality work experience and be absorbed at the end of it? And what's really interesting about this project, and it was brought to us, I think we started discussions on this back in May of 2021, is that the funder has also looked at this from a perspective of doing it as a multi-year project. They are looking to invest in the project over 4 years. and they really want to see the absorption outcomes. This is not about doing 2.5%. It's not about doing 5%. It's about actually creating this environment where youth are going to be absorbed and be able to track them downstream. And I think one of the, if any of you have been listening to the new YES CEO, Ravi Naidu, he's been speaking quite extensively about monitoring and evaluation, about absorption and SME facilitation and integration. So there's quite a common theme coming through, that this is not just about doing it for some scorecard recognition, but rather long-term sustainability. I'm going to stop for a moment and reallocate my slides quickly. Are there any questions from the audience that you'd like to get some insight around this particular project? Feel free to drop us a line and we'll be happy to engage on that. Clearly, Furai and I are doing a fabulous job today because it's very quiet in the chat today. So we will carry on straight away. And I'm hoping that we'll have some questions before the end. It's always nice to feel like our message is landing. But very quickly, for those who don't do it or have seen the buzzwords or the acronyms during their time at various organizations, this question of what are SDGs and ESGs. SDGs refer to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. There are a number of development goals which have been identified by the United Nations, where organizations have committed to supporting these certain goals, which include poverty alleviation, quality work experiences, access to amenities and fresh water. And there's a number of these goals that we're able to work toward. ESGs are effectively metrics that look at environmental, social, and governance roles. And, it's actually been one of the interesting things. We've been talking a lot about the energy sector, for instance, in South Africa. For those of you who follow the energy sector, COP26, there was this commitment to put $500 billion into the emerging markets in terms of electrification. And there were a lot of questions about it going into the likes of Eskom, which then has an impact on, are we simply funding new coal-fired power plants? What's the social impact of that? And then what is the governance that's in place to be able to manage these programs and ensure that the funds are actually deployed for the intentional purposes? So that's ESG in a nutshell. I'm not going to proclaim to be an out-and-out expert on it, but always happy to engage. But really what I wanted to do was just highlight the fact that YES gives you a platform to be able to actually integrate with ESG strategies. So if you are in a board meeting and you see this mention of it, make the natural link between YES and your ESG initiatives and your sustainable development goals. So this is just a quick look at it in terms of why YES would be relevant. 58% of YES youth are women, 85% are from grant recipient households, and 56% of those entering the workforce don't have matric. That means that YES does have the ability to align with a number of these sustainable development goals through our integration with YES implementation partners. This looks at just an overview in terms of what those SDGs were. So there's already 193 countries which are committed to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, aimed at alleviating extreme poverty, fight inequality and injustice, and tackled climate change by 2030. And this is a quote, I'll share this in the presentation as well. My message right now is to young people. We're living in a world where things are not the way we want. We're getting a system, we're getting a world which is unequal, which is sexist, which is racist. We have systems which are discriminating against people, our climate, and our environment is at risk. There's so much that needs to be done, but I hope that young people stand up, raise their voices, and they start their activism right now. And I think this is what it aligns very much with the YES message. We've got the ability to take a young population, many of whom have been excluded from economic activity and thereby social involvement. And hopefully using these programs, we can start to actually integrate with organizations to say, how do we build a better South Africa? I see some questions that have come through, so I'm just going to have a quick look at them and give some feedback. So one of the questions that's come through, and it's a great question actually, does the initiative include entrepreneurship or only work experience? So one of the questions one of the challenges that you have with a number of these youth employment initiatives or learnerships, etc., is that youth end up getting stuck in this cycle where they're constantly bouncing from doing 12 months or 6 months of work experience and then trying to get into a workforce. And while they may have picked up some skills, they don't have the social capital to be able to get there. They don't have things like jobs being created inside of their communities. And so one of the big pushes that we've got at the moment is to see how we integrate entrepreneurship into some of the things that we're doing. So I'll take you through a couple of projects. In fact, I'll take you through one of the big projects that I'm working on at the moment. In the Richards Bay area, youth unemployment sits at north of 60-odd%. We have built a number of different businesses, including a micro franchise for sanitary pad manufacturing, accounting. And so in both those cases, the youth take ownership of those franchises at the end of the 12-month work experience. And more recently, there's a beauty spa that has got into there. There's a drone pilot training initiative that's gone into there, and there's a scooter initiative that's gone into there. The youth, for instance, in the scooter initiative are going to be able to handle things like last mile delivery. So each of them is learning different projects as they go on. Yes, it's not prescriptive in terms of the type of work experience, but really we're looking to capacitate industries and create new jobs and new enterprises where they are. So it's a great question, Michelle. Thank you very much for tabling it. Any other questions or follow-up to that particular question?
Mark, so to add as well, I think what's been so fantastic is that we have been looking at how do we encourage more young people to venture into entrepreneurship, because the baseline survey data from YES shows us that 15% of YES youth have a side hustle upon entering the YES program. Our goal lately has been to say, how do we encourage these YES youth that after their work experience, they can continue their side hustle? So there's a number of youth who will place into Black-owned SMMEs for them to gain work experience and to understand what it means to run your own business. And what we're seeing after that experience is two pathways for youth. Either A, they are absorbed into that Black-owned SMME who've been able to benefit from having a YES youth with them for a year and not have to pay their salary. The second trend we're seeing is that YES youth have been so inspired by working within this Black-owned SMME that they want to turn their side hustle into a sustainable business. And for those youth, we encourage them to complete their 12 entrepreneurship modules, Siyazakela. And once they've completed their 12 entrepreneurship modules, we then encourage them to apply for the NYDA startup grant. So YES has a really great relationship with the NYDA, so that a pathway for our youth is entrepreneurship, and they could be one of the businesses that the NYDA could fund. So we're really, really exploring entrepreneurship, not only for work placements, but also in terms of pathways for YES youth. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Furai. We also have and maybe you've got something to add to this from a follow-up question from Michelle. Do we have data on the sources of livelihood, where the youth groups are to build those businesses and support to access to new markets? So I'll jump in first, but Furai might have some additional commentary on it. I think what we're seeing is a lot of organizations realizing you can't keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So, we look in particularly the mining communities at the moment. They're all going through a boom period. They've got a bit of extra profit. They've got a lot of social initiatives on the go. But the risk that they face at the moment is that they are the primary employer in a place like Richards Bay or in Rustenburg. And when the cycle turns and the commodity cycle is not necessarily running as profitably as it is in the 2021, 2022 years, suddenly they become the target of the community because they were expected to be the banker for creating jobs, for creating social initiatives. So what we are seeing is a lot of these organizations in those regions looking at either collaborative things. So in a lot of the mining towns, for instance, they're trying to collaborate with the tourism sector to be able to say, well, we're having a good patch at the moment. We expect the cycle to turn, and at some point you'll be having a better time than us. We want to be able to collaborate with our initiatives rather than everybody doing it off their own bat. So we're seeing quite a lot of feedback from the individual communities and community levels where they're trying to create jobs. a lot in the places like Rustenburg, Limpopo, and Mpumalanga. So from that perspective, definitely looking at it. I think where YES is trying to plug in, obviously the guys that operate these businesses know that they've got better boots on the ground in terms of looking at the data from there, but they certainly are giving us that feedback, identifying areas where youth unemployment is particularly high. I mentioned the Northern Cape as a perfect example. A lot of projects coming through in the Northern Cape from a renewable energy perspective. So definitely pleased with some of the projects what we're being able to achieve there. Furai, anything you want to add on that?
Thanks, Mark. And I think that, so to build on what you've said, what's been so interesting from the YES side, and I think what we also have to do more of is exactly what Michelle is asking in terms of analyzing where these youth groups are and where these youth have their businesses, and seeing what infrastructure is actually around these youth to be able to understand what sort of support they need. A really important tool for us at YES has been a tool called Youth Explorer. It's such a fantastic tool. It is a free tool. And on Youth Explorer, you type in an area that you would like to perhaps roll out a YES program in, and then you get data to understand what is the youth population in that area, how many registered businesses are in that area, how many clinics, how many schools are in that area. And that mapping of not only the geography and not only the demographics, but also the opportunity helps us to understand what sort of support young people need and what sort of interventions they need within that area. What would be really great for us to do at YES and to work with many of you who are on this call would be looking at the 15% of YES youth who do have a business, deep diving into what sort of business it is, and then from the get-go linking those youth with corporates who could mentor and empower those youth to be part of their ED chain. So that'll be really fantastic for us to explore. And it would be really great, Michelle, if you'd like us to continue this conversation afterwards, I'd be very happy to just drop my mail in the chat box and for us to really explore. Entrepreneurship is definitely a topic I'm passionate about, and it'll be great to see how many more pathways we can create for youth.
Yeah, thanks, Farah. And I think that this really is kind of the next, we talk about it internally about being YES 2.0. YES finds its roots in an incentive out of the DTRC. There were a lot of comments about, YES should have created 1 million jobs. It was never what the intention around YES as a single private sector entity could achieve with no government funding. But the answer is that, YES is evolving, it's developing skills, it's developing capacity, it's developing quality relationships with the partners to be able to say, yes, we've got we understand some of these things, we're building up capacity, we understand the ecosystem, and now we are starting to feed into it, not just depending on a piece of legislation. Follow-up questions that I can see here. The first one being, what do we pay YES youth, considering some of the changes that have just come through in terms of national minimum wage? So just very quickly, a reminder that YES is aligned with the national minimum wage. It's not a learnership stipend. It is aligned with the national minimum wage unless you have a bargaining council agreement or a sectoral determination. So remembering currently up to the end of February, it's 3,760 is the current national minimum wage on the 40-hour work week. That will increase to 4,020. For those of you that have got internal placements, please remember to update your payrolls. For those that are on the YES implementation partner model, where YES runs or assists with running the payroll, you will find a top-up invoice in your mailbox shortly for the difference on that. So I hope that answers that question. By all means, the other question that often comes up is, can I pay more than national minimum wage? Absolutely. I think that, the best paid YES youth, I think I've seen as a financial manager earning 32,000 Rand. There are lots of ways, don't always think about YES purely as an entry level position. You can recruit everything from software developers through to finance managers, through to project managers, provided they meet the definition of a YES youth. Follow-up question here. What is the YES monitoring evaluation function and how does it evolve? And I think this is another thing that we are quite passionate about. And Furai and I have done quite a lot of work around this. So when you sign up to YES, you typically see that you receive, you effectively account for 3 costs. The first one being an annual registration fee. The second one looking at the monitoring evaluation function. So remember, YES is the only organization that is able to monitor and evaluate a YES program and works in conjunction with providing that evidence to your BBBEE verification teams. That takes a couple of forms. So firstly, those youth all receive the YES mobile phones, and I'll let Furai talk to the purpose of those mobile phones in a moment. The second one being there is access to a call center. So youth can phone in with everything. And we had a situation the other day, youth phoned in and said, I've been offered a permanent employment contract by somebody, but my employer, my current YES employer is telling me that I can't go and accept that because even though it's 3 times what I'm currently earning because I'm on a YES program and I can only go and move once the YES program is finished. That's not correct. They are able to phone into the YES call center and receive input to be able to advise them on situations like that. We have things where there are situations where youth haven't received what YES defines as a quality work experience and engages with YES to be able to say to the corporate, you've actually got to fit into line. This is a very valuable incentive from a BBBEE perspective, but we are able to then push back to the corporate and ensure that youth obtain a quality work experience. We are always working on this function, and I know that Furai has been scaling up in terms of some of the applications that are happening there and some of the things that we're working on there. Furai, I don't know if you've got anything to add on the M&E side of things.
Thanks, Mark. Once again, one of my favorite topics at YES. So what we do, so in addition to what Mark has mentioned in terms of the phones, is that we realize that for us as YES to have a consistent monitoring and evaluation function that is across the placements of active youth, we have to use a variety of tools so that we can fulfill the gazetted function. One of the tools, like Mark said, is the cell phones, where youth are engaging on their smartphones, not only for learning and development, but for YES's monitoring and evaluation. Another tool as well would also be the call center. And for those of you who have active youth on the program, they should have received a call from the call center. We send out an SMS to youth at the beginning of each month, which has got the number of the YES call center. And the goal of these calls is to just check in on the youth, to understand how they are doing, whether they're still active on the program, how their work experience is going, and to nudge them to engage on the apps. And that tool has been so important for us to be able to ensure that youth are having a great work experience. And if they're not, for us to take necessary steps to engage with the corporate or with the host. The third aspect that we do for monitoring and evaluation is nudging. So through the YES apps and SMSs, we nudge the youth to complete your program, to give it your all, ensure that you are engaging in your apps as frequently as possible. If we're then talking more about the implementation partner model, key aspects that we use for monitoring and evaluation there would be site visits. We do quarterly site visits to youth across the country just to check in on how they are doing, and we try to reach as many as possible. And then for the implementation partners, we've got what we call the IP scorecard, which tracks the progress and the delivery of the implementation partner in line with our contractual obligations with them. And we score them on a number of items, including their administrative capacity, the provision of quality work experience, the absorption rates, youth success stories, and the type of work youth are doing and whether that is fit for the economic growth that we're seeing at the moment. And I think what's really fantastic about the scorecard is that IPs have to get 70% and above to continue to be YES partners and to be shown to corporates for them to get more youth placements. So that's been an effective tool to ensure that we've got the best partners on board, like what we saw in the leadership initiative, who can provide youth with quality work experience and ensure that they transition to other opportunities post YES. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Furai. I am cognizant of time. Are there any other questions that the audience would like us to have a look at? I'll give 60 seconds just for those who are going to type. Right, well, it looks like there's no more questions that have come through. As I said, you're welcome to engage with either myself or Furai. She's just posted her email address in the chat. Let me actually share it within the broader chat facility. Yes. And I think it really has been it's an opportunity today to talk about a real world project. I think for those of us who approach this through a BE lens or through a compliance lens, we often don't get to see the real world impact. We've got one of the partners yesterday that was involved. It's got a big push to capacitate the township economy, and they've put over 500 youth across different projects across township-based youth positions. And, they were just doing a simple thing like capacitating schools to do after-school sports. And, there's a health impact to it. I mean, the average South African doesn't do 14 minutes a day of exercise. And results in one of the most unhealthy populations across the globe, despite being one of the youngest. There's so many reasons to go and look at the YES implementation partner model and say, I can actually make a difference with this. Hopefully today we managed to convince you of a few things. The first one being, YES is pretty awesome and we do some pretty cool stuff. But on top of that is also that we actually know how to do this stuff in terms of building our projects. We have worked with most of the major corporates in South Africa. We know that we do these things right. We're constantly interrogating ourselves and looking for evidence that what we're doing is working. And with any luck today has just convinced you that we're not simply doing something from a compliance perspective, but also from an impact perspective. And I hope that you're able to join us on this journey. And when we report back in March, it won't be 71,000, it'll be 73,500. So looking forward to walking this journey with you. And thank you everybody for your opportunities today. As a reminder, this playback facility will be made available, and looking forward to chatting. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you so much to everyone on the call. Have a great day further.